Welcome back. This is still Daybreak Africa on television Nigeria. And if you just join us, welcome on board. And if you've been with us, thanks for sticking around. Like we told you, we'll be having some guests to talk about the CAMA Act 2020 in the studio. And I told you we'll be having a barrister from Lagos.
Barrister Michael Jogeri. He's a lawyer with Austin Peters & Co. in Lagos, actually a corporate lawyer.
All right, and he'll be talking to us virtually, that's via Zoom, on the business angle of the CAMA Act. And we have the presiding pastor of Philadelphia Kingdom Glory Church, the person of Reverend Moses Gracefield in the building. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Nice to have you, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to be here too.
You actually look nice, sir.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Just
can
like
do.
you.
Took
Just
it from
like
my
you.
mouth.
Just like you.
All right.
Good morning,
Barrister,
Mr.
good
Michael.
morning.
Barrister Michael, good morning.
I think your mics are muted. I can't hear you guys.
Yeah,
We can
so
hear
loud
you.
and clear.
Can you hear us?
All right, before we return back to Michael, let's begin with Reverend in the building. The CAMA Act 2020 has actually been generating a whole lot of controversy, and there's been so much noise about it. And we really want you to put it across to us. Why is the church not comfortable with this particular act?
It's okay. I want to thank you for the privilege and the opportunity that I have here to represent the church community.
Okay.
And not just the church community, but I also believe that I'm going to talk extensively or inclusively of other non-governmental organizations too.
Okay.
Because the particular act, the section of the act, which is the section 839, which has been generating that controversy, affects not just the church alone, but also other associations like the youth pressure groups. We talk about like the Arewa Youth Consultative Forum, or even the Otudua Congress, any of these other associations.
Nigeria Delta Youth Council.
Yes, all of them. They fall under that group of, and this regulation affects them also and their operations. Now, I'd like us to take a brief look at the consequences of this. Of such kind of regulation.
All right, before you continue, let's get back to Barrister and see if he's with us now. Barrister, good morning. All right, nice to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
All right, we can hear you.
Okay, we can actually hear you so loud and clear. Like we introduced you earlier on, you are going to be talking side by side from somebody who will be representing the interest of the church, why you make Nigerians understand the numerous advantages of this bill. Well, before we take your word, the Reverend was saying something. So, Reverend, let's continue with you.
It's okay. I was trying to say that I believe that the overall intention of the CAMA Act is good.
Okay.
And also it's like I read the abridged version of the CAMA Act and I realized that there are so many provisions there that it's necessary and also it's good for business flexibility and also for productivity in the country. But I also believe that while the CAMA Act is favorable to the business world, it's very unfavorably to the non-governmental organizations. And the non-governmental organizations make up a very large bulk of the economic activities of the country, and not just the economic activities, but the social activities and the religious activities, including even political activities, because we have pressure groups that also form the basic foundation of political pressure. And if you take away their independence, the independence of the running of the organization, and you put it in the hand of the government, then they are muzzled, they are emasculated, and they can't fulfill their statutory functions or the reason for which the association was actually created. Because, like we know, in Nigeria, there is a dichotomy between the elite and the let's say the common man. By the time they want elections, they want to win elections, they will come down to the level of everybody and try to convince them we're all together. But by the time they get there, they don't represent the interests of those who put them there. They represent their own interest. And at that level, it breeds suspicion between those who are governed and those who are governing. So we don't have the liberty for us to actually say that they have the best interest of those associations at heart.
Okay.
And then number two is that I also like us to look at this scenario. You see, like the religious bodies in Nigeria, especially the church, they are self-governing. Not only that they're self-governing, they are primarily the effort of individuals. And then apart from that, like as a Christian, it is not a government that calls a pastor. And it is not a government that empowers a pastor. His calling is divine, and his calling is primarily by God, and he's accountable primarily to God. Now, I also want to say that I am totally in favor of anything that would shake corruption, whether within the church or outside the church. I'm not talking as somebody who is defending any form of misconduct or mismanagement within the church. But there are laws already put in place, like the Money Laundering Act, and then other laws that are like the anti-corruption practices and other laws that are already in the country. If we have aggrieved practice within the church or within any association, they should be able to approach the court, and the court should be able to examine those grievances based on the existing law. But this has taken even the power from the court and has put it in the hand of a commissioner who is appointed directly by the president. Meaning that the executive has taken taken the power for them to make decisions within the due process of the court. Like I'm talking about like litigation and any other thing that will establish the guilt of whoever is being accused, and then they suspend the trustees of that organization. That is an organization which they contributed nothing to build. They, whether financially, whether morally, or in any other way, they have not contributed anything. I believe that every organization should have within itself checks and balances. And those checks and balances, once they are not being observed, then the court of law is there to be approached by whoever is aggrieved. So this act has robbed the church and other non-governmental organizations of their capacity to function independently and to stand in opposition to any form of oppression. It will become an instrument to put people in place who favor only the policies of the government and not their position on every other thing they want to do.
All right, from your position, I can actually see that the powers of the court have actually been muscled to an extent here. But before we come back to you and then ask you some more questions, we'd like to bring the barrister in. So Susan,
all right, Barrister Michael, are you with us? Barrister Michael.
Yes, I can hear you.
All right, you're welcome to the program. Nice having you.
Hello?
Hello?
I hear you now.
All right. You are a legal practitioner, and we see how this law, this CAMA Act, also affects large and medium-scale enterprises. So we would like for you to expatiate on that. What is the positive impact of this act on small and medium-scale enterprises, and also the negative impact?
Thank you very much for having me. And thank you very much for having me. Let me begin by commending you for having this kind of discussion, because Nigeria is a democracy, and I believe that in a democracy, we must try to accommodate as much as possible the concerns of the varying interests. So it is legitimate for us to have discussions like this, especially if issues are being raised with regards to laws as far-reaching as this that concern us all. So in discussions like this are very important, but it's also very important that we should pay close attention to what the experts, which in this case are the lawyers, will typically have to say about these things. Because if we don't do that, we stand the risk of muddling up issues with sentiments and emotions. Having said that, the benefits of this law to SMEs are many. In fact, it's one of the driving forces behind why we needed to amend the old law. So it has opened a new way to a lot of benefits for the SMEs. I'll just itemize a few of them. So one of them is that it has made it possible now for a single member, a single individual to own a company. That was not possible before. So if we look at typically the way we conduct business in this country, is mostly SME driven. You know, we don't have the sort of corporate structures that are driving the other economies in the world. So our economy is dominated by SMEs. It was important that we amend our laws to accommodate the operations of this SME and provide them with some measure of comfort and protection that they needed under the law. So now it is possible for just an individual to set up a company, which makes things easier as opposed to the previous practice where, as opposed to the previous law where a minimum of 2 persons were required to set up a company. There's also the introduction of a concept known as limited liability partnership. What that means is that you can set up a partnership that is an added form of business to the other forms of business that we have. Now you set up a partnership that you can register with the Corporate Affairs Commission and enjoy the benefits that other companies enjoy under the law without actually being a law. Then it has also dispensed with some of the requirements that the old law required that companies should do. So for instance, procurement of the common seal is no longer necessary for private companies, which will mostly affect SMEs because they are mostly private companies. There's also the provision that private companies, which in this case also falls within the bracket of SMEs, are no longer required to have company secretaries. So that takes away that expense and that additional operational cost from them. Then of course, the new law now also allows us to have meetings online, such as the discussion we are having like matters. We have been a meeting and to be recognized under the law. It allows you also to reach out to the CAC directly in making your returns or your statutory filings. You can do that online also. So these are some of the many benefits that the new law has introduced and that are of immense benefit to SMEs.
All right, Barrister, a quick one about the section 839 of this particular CAMA Act that's generating a whole lot of controversies. Like the Reverend who is in the studio with us just talked about, the church, the government has not really contributed anything to the development of these churches, and they want to sit on it and then decree how these churches should be run. What is the legality of that?
In summary, is that it allows this, that is section 839, it allows the CAC, it gives the CAC the power to suspend the managers, to suspend the trustees of an NGO, which of course it includes churches and other interest groups because they are registered under Part C of CAMA, to suspend them and appoint interim managers where it believes that certain things have happened. So for instance, it believes that there's mismanagement of the association. It believes that the property of the association is endangered, such as maybe it is abandoned. And also where there's issues of fraud or mismanagement of funds of the association. And lastly, where it is in the public interest to do so. Now, it is very important. A lot of the discussions around this section have just been limited to that section 831 subsection 1 without looking at subsection 2. Subsection 2 for me really is the meat because they say the devil is in the details. What does subsection 2 says? Subsection 2 says that the CAC is only able to exercise this power if he obtains an order of the court. So I just listened to my reverend gentleman who says that the court has been removed from the system. That is not true. The part of the matter is that subsection 2 says that the CAC can only suspend, and mind you, suspend, not removal. It says suspend only if he obtains an order of the court. What that means is that where the CAC needs to act under this section, it must first go to the court, where the court will invite other parties that are likely going to be affected, listening to both sides before deciding whether or not to issue that order. So that immediately introduces into that particular section the system of checks and balances. The CAC cannot unilaterally act. It has to consult the court who will moderate the power of balance between it and the associations that it is seeking to interfere with. So for me, really, unless the argument is that we don't want any form of regulation at all for NGOs or other entities registered under that particular law, I don't see how other way we could have done it, because this is global best practice, which is that entities that are regulated, unless you don't want registration, but having registered, there must be some form of monitoring that goes on. And that form of monitoring, the test in a democracy is that there are checks and balances to monitor it so that it is not open to abuse. The question now is, how well have this new law been structured around that issue of checks and balances? Which now takes us back to that subsection 2, which says that the CAC can only act if it obtains an order of the court. Orders of the court are not what just go and get and come out. I know there are issues of potential abuses, but it's a democracy. You know, parties are invited, arguments are advanced on both sides, and at the end of the day, an impartial umpire, which is the court, looks at both arguments and decides whether or not to go with one as against the other. I feel that there is enough checks and balances to balance the power, which again, we should emphasize, is not to remove. There's a lot of discussion about remove, take over. It says suspend. It says appoint interim managers, which means it's a temporary arrangement, usually to investigate what has gone wrong so that you can return things to normal. Lastly, we should also note that this power, if you look at subsection 2, this power is also extended to members of the association, which means if members of the association also believe that they should interfere, they can also run to court, get that same order to come back and do the same thing that the act has said that the CAC can do.
All right, before I know Reverend. Yeah, and then my colleague here will have a question. But before that, you know, if you follow the statement of the Reverend, he said these institutions are largely self-governed, which means they already have these practices of checks and balance in place already. And then when you talk about the structure which this law has actually been modeled out concerning how to carry out these checks and balance and all, you know that church is actually more like a spiritual organization, and then you have CAC, which is more like a secular organization, decide, and even the court. And maybe when they are trying to appoint an interim managers to watch over the handlings of these businesses or these churches or these NGOs, like for church particularly, we're so particular about the church now because there's a little gray area surrounding that. And you now appoint somebody who is not of that same faith to watch over, or how would the church go about appointing these interim managers to watch over in case of any breach of the interest or the intention?
Sorry, I'm not cutting you.
All right.
If you act, it's any person. Okay. Any person. I read I wasn't talking about the issue of I didn't say that the court process is suspended. That's not what I said. I said the litigation process.
Okay.
Because for someone to be accused of a crime, you must have to be proven guilty by a court of law before that kind of a person can be either adjudged guilty or sentenced. Now, if in a case of suspicion, I believe there are institutions already on ground that are supposed to carry out such investigations, like the EFCC and then other financial crime institutions that the government have already. I believe that you can't just leave the running of an affair of a spiritual organization to the dictate of a secular person or a secular commission, because that is not his purview. He didn't receive the mandate. Does not even understand how the church itself was established at the level that went into it, the pain, the fasting, the sacrifices that went into it. Like I said from the very beginning, I have never engaged in any illegal act, and my church, and I will never engage in it. And my church, the church I pastor, can never engage in anything like that. But in a situation where an instrument of government is being used to oppress the church, to suppress their voice, because even currently you realize that the government that we have, I'm sorry to say, they have crippled the opposition and they have muzzled them. So we don't have credible opposition against this government, and it seems it's only the church that's talking about the violence, talking about the insecurity, talking about the general problems of the country, and by the time you direct such a law against the church, it's like trying to muzzle the voice of the church, so that by the time anybody rises to speak anything, because these things, this situation can be easily abused. That person can become a target of the government. Not only the church, even other pressure groups. They can become the target of the government. It will empower them to carry out draconian activities, which will cripple the activities of the association.
All right, Reverend, so now,
just to buttress what he was asking earlier on. So we're talking about clash of interest now. So we have more like it, you know. So they are coming from a different angle, and the religious bodies are also coming, the church is also coming from a different angle. Now, when there is a clash of interest, who now, because yes, we're talking about checks and balances, it means that these people, since they are registered under the Corporate Affairs Commission, it means they should be checks and balances and they should be overseen. So in a case where there are clashes of interest, you know, they are being overseen, who now oversees when there's abuse, you know, and when that comes in? That's the question we're asking you.
Okay, see, I think we should keep emphasizing the role of the courts in this process. So it's not as though the CSA will sit in Abuja and just issue orders and appoint people. The court is going to be involved. And you know, the court is going to base its decision on facts. It's going to base its decision on certain consideration. It's at that point, so the issue of how do you appoint someone that is not conversant with the church, or how do you even appoint someone that is an unbeliever to manage a church? These are facts that we presented to the court by opposing parties. So there's the regulator on the one hand saying that we feel we need to intervene. And there's the members of the church who are going to be affected on the other hand, who say, no, we don't feel you need to interfere, you know. And so there's the issue of, should we come in at all? That both parties will argue before the court, which is a non-partial empire. And then there'll also be the issue of, if at all we should interfere, who gets appointed? That again is going to be a matter that the CSA is going to propose that we want to appoint this person. And the members are going to say, no, this is the person, and the court will take a decision based on facts available to it. We should add that I think it's a very dangerous proposition to push the argument that government is against church. You know, the government we are looking at here, we are looking at the legislator, which made the law. We are looking at the judiciary, who will interpret the law, and which I have said are involved by virtue of subsection 2. And we are looking at the executive, which will enforce the law. I don't think it is possible, or I don't think it is plausible to argue that the entire gamut of the government is against the church. Mind you, the legislator, the executive, the judiciary, they are made up of many of them are also members of the church. So we're not looking at a system that is abstract, that is imported, that will come and impose on us things that we do not want. This is going to, there are a lot of checks and balances that if we give room, if we open up our minds to the system, we can both fight it. You know, we should also point out this power of taking over entities is a power that has been in our laws for a long time against in so many other sectors of the economy. So for instance, banks have the power to take over banks. CBN has the power to take over banks if they believe, and they have done it before in the case of Oceanic Bank and the rest. In the capital market, you have the SEC, which can take over capital market operators. It's there in pensions, it's there in insurance. That is not to mean that they just go about taking over entities as they want or using it to oppress their perceived opponents. There's always the court that comes in to balance that check, to balance that power. Because of course, there has to be a balance. There has to be checks and balances. And the court exists. We should bear in mind that the court is not an abstract entity. It's made up of members that some of the judges are members of our church. You know, some of them we have the Muslims, committed Christians. They are going to be there to ensure that the CSA does not abuse this power. And of course, the members that are going to be affected will usually be called upon in the adjudication in deciding whether or not to interfere or who to appoint. Members of the church that are going to be affected will be involved in that argument, and they will have the opportunity to make their case and say, no, this person you are about to appoint to run this church is a Muslim, or this person you are about to appoint to run the church is an unbeliever. And the court will look at both arguments and take a decision at the end of the day that it is fair and that it is balanced and that it's in the interest of everybody. That is what the court system exists for. Unless we are saying that we don't have confidence in the judiciary at all, which of course I think.
Let's 839 side by side with other developed climes. Like, how does this function in other countries? And apart from that, I also want you to touch briefly on the fact that, you know, when you say it would be very dangerous argument to come from the angle that this law is more like against the church and all. Let's also consider the confidence of the people on our judiciary system, especially with the independence of judiciary vis-a-vis the executive, considering what has been happening in the nearest, like in the past.
So the global best practice, so if you look at the UK, for instance, there's what we call the Charities Commission, which is established by the law. It is exclusively devoted to regulating charities organizations, which of course include the churches, because they are registered under that category. So if you look at it, it's a much more encompassing legal framework that regulates every aspect of NGOs, which includes churches. That was the same system that we attempted to introduce when we talked about the religious regulation bill that was defeated, I think sometime last year or 2 years ago, I can't remember. So this, what this section 839 seeks to enforce or seeks to introduce is global press practices, what is done in other jurisdictions, which is that unless an entity is not registered, and it should be registered because it concerns the public, you know, unless an entity is not registered, once it is registered, there's always a form of regulation. Regulation is not always there to oppress or to take over or to derive benefit. Mind you, one of the grounds upon which the CSA can interfere is to protect the assets of that association. We have had cases where promoters of churches or promoters of NGOs have fought, you know, with members in between, with nobody to intervene on their behalf. You know, we have also had cases of mismanagement. We cannot pretend or run away from these things. You know, we have also had the real effect of the activities of NGOs and churches and religious organizations, rather, not churches, religious organizations, the effect on society as a whole. So regulation is not just there to oppress or to suppress. Religion is there also to protect and promote. Then coming back to, I think you asked a second question, which I can't remember.
Okay, talking about dangerous argument if they say this law is targeted at the churches.
The confidence is there, which is why I started off this section by saying that in the democracy, it's always very important to listen to all sides. So which takes us back to how this law came into effect. Of course, there was a process of public hearing, you know, the first, the second, the third, not to talk of the our legislators individually, you know, that followed up on it. What that means is that we had the opportunity to contribute to it and to shape it in the form that we want collectively. In the democracy, it's majority that carries the votes. The majority may be right, but if they insist on something, and having made that law, we should also be open to all arguments for and against it. And if collectively we have come together to say that, look, by our nature, we don't want this provision in this law, we should be bold enough, the legislator, the system should be bold enough to change itself. We can always be open to these changes. No, we can do and undo as a people. What is important is that what works for us best. So yes, there's the issue of whether or not the public does not believe in the judiciary, the nature of confidence, but there's no alternative to it. We can't operate a system without the judiciary. And we must have a judiciary that we must all keep improving on. So yes, confidence is not as it should be, I admit, but of course it keeps getting better, and it's everybody's responsibility to ensure that we believe in the system and individually we contribute to making it better day by day.
Thank you very much. Just in case you're just joining us, we have been speaking with Mr. Michael Jogeri. He's a corporate lawyer and also a Reverend Moses from Philadelphia Glory Ministries. I hope I am correct. Partially. Okay. I hope to say that right when we'll come back. We'll have to go on a quick break right now, and we'll be back to wrap up on the conversation. Stay with us.
Your body bang, bang, your body bang, 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 your body bang, your body bang. And I give us when you take a selfie, when you take a pose, you the ginger the boy. Every time you bend the low, I'm okay when you take a selfie. When you take a photo, you the ginger the boy. Every time you bend the low.
Want to shoot a dope music video at 50% discount?
50% discount?
Yeah, 50% discount. Bougie Down to Television Nigerian with world-class equipment and a badass expert crew.
Oga, face your camera now. Shh. Continue.
Where was I? Everything extra.
Carolina, you better.
Hurry up.
I know say you know this thing you did do, my girl, say you know. The body is big and I know say you know.
My name is Chiwendu Osisiago, presenter Television Nigerian Business Daily. In a globalizing world, ours is to keep you engaged, informed and educated on contemporary happenings in the business world. We therefore command a special audience of business-minded viewers who are eager to know more about business, I mean your business. Why don't you take advantage of our special affordable offer to let the world know about your concepts, your goods, and of course, your services? You can call us on 080-3071-6959 or 070-3234-9054. You can also visit us at Television Nigerian in Guzapi, Abuja, and follow us on all the social media handles on Facebook, YouTube, and of course, on Twitter at Television Nigerian. Your business is our concern.
All right, you're welcome back from that break. This is still Daybreak Africa on Television Nigerian, and we've been talking with barrister Michael Dugeri and Reverend Moses, and the issue is about the CAMA Act that has been breeding a lot of controversies around us recently. And before we went on that break, I was going to ask a question, Reverend Sir.
Go ahead.
The issue, the fact that it seemed like there was some quiet, you know, when this whole thing was happening, because we can recall that the lawyer actually talked about
public hearing,
you know, and talking about the law passing from the first reading, second reading. You know, we know the process that is required before something's actually passed and then finally declared as a law and an act. So my question is, what exactly was happening? Because it just seems like people just woke up. I mean, the church, you know, and even other religious bodies just woke up and realized that, okay, this is upon us. And it seems like, to me, it wants to seem like medicine after death. So, I mean, couldn't there have been, you know, a process to have stopped it before it got to this point we're talking about? And if there wasn't, is there anything happening right now?
It's okay. Thank you for that question. I'd like to say that recently the Christian Association of Nigeria issued a press statement on this matter. Okay. And they said that they were invited to a public hearing of another act similar to this. That was the first tenure of the president of the current administration, and which they outrightly rejected. And by implication of what they said, they were not consulted or invited to the public hearing of this one. In fact, if you look at the This Day review, it is believed that that particular part of the regulation was smuggled into the act that was not originally part of the act.
Oh, really?
That's exactly the way it was put. That was smuggled into the act that was not originally part of the act. Therefore, it looks like the people were taken unaware.
I came across the allegation.
It's okay. So that has been the position. The number two is that there are men of God who are talking, the leaders of the church. Bishop Edipo talked. I also saw that Pastor Debo has come up to talk. PFN has issued a press conference. Khan has issued a press conference. Now, I'd like us to look at the church as an entity. The head of the church is not the president. And the president has no oversight over the church. When there are issues of breach of the law, that is within the purview of the law to bring offenders to book. Yeah. But for the president to assume leadership appointment, whether on the interim, I'm talking about the president by proxy, and now for him to appoint interim leaders or permanent leaders, he has no right, he has no jurisdiction in that area, because the church is a spiritual organ, and the church and the state, they are separate. This is a secular nation. This is not a this is not an Islamic or a Christian nation. This is a secular nation. Therefore, the secular government don't have complete oversight over religious activities. What they have is to provide environment where they can thrive, and also to check if there are excesses, which I am perfectly in support of. That if there are excesses, there should be laws put in place, but not an appointment of leaders. Now, a board of trustees is the governing board of the church. And as the governing board of the church, whoever is the founder or whoever is the foreperson in that ministry happens also to be the chairman, meaning that he is the one who makes decisions. Now, here is the technical part of that. I believe that if there are people within the organization who are not comfortable with the way the organization is being run, there are laws. Every organization have bylaws. They have constitutions. There are laws within the organization which they can fall back to. And if they can't handle the matter, they can approach the court of law, which it is against biblical principles. The Bible says that the church should not go to law before unbelievers. It's against biblical principles. Putting the church ahead of the government. He said the church shall judge the world, and the church shall even judge the angels. Therefore, in situations where the church is not living to expectation, I believe that the law can come in. But beside that, the government cannot have an instrument whereby they can take over the running of a church which they didn't found, which they have never contributed anything to build. They are not considering the sacrifices of those who built it.
I think that's the angle that
they're not considering the sacrifices. Like someone like me, I have fasted until I was medically certified dead in order to build the church. I spend millions to assist people going to charity every year. I'm not on salary. I only live by the gifts that come from people, and I channel it directly into evangelism and also into helping people and into church building. People have made huge sacrifices to build these things. You can't just wake up and take up somebody's label without due process. And this law does not include the companies. It's only talking. It's only relevant to non-governmental organizations and associations. It does not talk about the taking over of CAC of any directorship of any company. There's nothing like that in this law. So it looks as if it's targeting the church or religious organization and other associations.
All right. When you were talking about the church having this self mechanism to do the checks and balance and all, and then there are certain things you said when, like the church, the government don't really found them, they don't call the pastor and all. I want to put it across to you. Are you trying to say the church is above the law of the land?
No, the church is not above the law of the land.
Okay.
But the law is made for people. People are not made for the law. Now, there are provisions in the law of amendments of bills and acts, of acts rather, amendments of acts. When an act is found to be obnoxious, offensive, and contrary to the interest of the people, then there are procedures. And my advice is that each of the different organizations, whether church organizations or other associations, they should consult their lawyers, and then they should make a credible presentation to the House of Assembly so that they can initiate the process of amendment. But here is my problem. The stand of the government is not, they are not paying attention to the people. The government said that anybody who does not obey the law to be deregistered. Now, you can't carry out corporate activities like banking and stuff like that if you're not registered under the corporate affairs. That is oppressive, because the government is not there for itself, it's there for the people. If people tell you, we don't want this thing, your duty as somebody who represents the people is to listen to them, take their grievances into consideration, and then begin to call for a mediation or reconciliation of interests and ideas.
All right, for the want of time, we're actually running out of time. We're trying to reconnect back to Barrister, but before we now get back to Barrister, we actually want you to be giving us your last words now. Let's take a look at the involvement of the church in political activities, because that is one way I felt that they allowed this thing to pass the first reading, the second reading, and we're supposed to have people who are of the Christian faith to be in the parliament, to be in the parliament, and they did not see anything wrong with this, or did not talk about it till it passed the first reading, the second reading. And then when we analyze, in a very brief term, they analyze the involvement of church in the politics, and then the way forward, because we already talked about amendment, or trying to, maybe the PFN and the other people trying to reach out a process of amendment. And then why are other religious bodies not complaining? Why is it that it's just the church that is complaining?
Seems so. And then I think after you answer that one, just lastly, I would like to say, in an advent that you're talking about some people already coming out, to speak against it at this time, in a situation whereby moving forward, we do not get, to be able to
carry out an amendment.
What will be the case, and what stand we will now take, and what will be our positioning?
It's okay. Let me begin from where he talked. Number one, I believe that there's, like I said before, there is a serious dichotomy between the governed and the governors or the government in this country. When these people want political offices. They will come to the church, cap in hand, begging, kneeling down, asking pastors to pray for them. They come to me like that too. I pray for them. But by the time they get there, they feel they're too big for them to be controlled, advised, or spoken to, and they don't represent the interests of the church, but their own private interest. I believe that the situation is so bad that a lot of pastors keep regretting that they assist these people to get into power. That's number one. Number two is that, like I said before, the political involvement of the church is that I believe that the church can come together and have a structural system in place where they can send people to actually represent them who have the interest of the church. I'm talking about the way forward now. They can come up that way, because if things are left the way it has always been, then there's going to be continuity in the complaint, and the system will always be the same. Then number two, from the angle you are saying, is that I believe that all laws are subject to amendment. All laws are subject to amendment, and the government should listen to the people, because if they don't listen to the people, they are going to have a situation where there's going to be anarchy. There's going to be anarchy, there's going to be rebellion. Because it is a democracy. Because nobody is going to just sit down and then watch things just go wrong without voicing their own opinion. In democracy, you have the right to protest, you have the right to be heard, you have the right also to withdraw people that you sent to represent you. So that's the system.
All right.
It's okay.
All right. Since Barrister is back on now, Barrister, let's finally hear from you. You know, we were talking about the court. We also allege that, okay, it seems like the powers of the court has actually been taken away, but you clarified that already. But in a situation where the church is actually campaign for forgiveness, is one of the entities settle out of court. But now this law is trying to take people through the rigorous section of litigations and all. How does that settle with the faith of the people and the practice of the country?
Can you come again?
We were talking about, you know, we've actually see some sort of allegations that the power of the court has actually been taken by this particular act, but you've clarified that already. But you know, church is actually an entity, or the religious bodies are entities that preach forgiveness, and then court is one way that if you want to forgive people, you don't have to go to the court, but this law is encouraging that. So it's more like a conflict of interest. How do we separate that?
Okay, the conflict of interest, it exists between the conflict of interest in this case exists between two different systems, not within one system. So you talk of conflict if there's conflict within the law. I'm not a religious expert, so I won't talk about the forgiving nature of the church. But within the framework of what the system is trying to introduce, or what the system has introduced, is that it provides a window to remedy. And that window is that if persons have been alleged to have committed infractions, or if the property of the church is imminent danger, it provides a window that the government, in this case the CSA, can come in to say, you guys should step aside for a while we appoint someone to hold the ship while we try to remedy, or while we try to go to the root of that issue. It has nothing to do with indicting leaders of the church. It's a suspension. Like I've said before, it's not a removal. You can look at the letters of the law. So it does not go into indicting any member yet. You know, it's a system that provides an opportunity for everyone to come to a round table where there are issues, or where there are perceived issues, and sort them out. So if we look at it from that angle, rather than the perception that someone has done something wrong and therefore the person deserves to be punished, we may be missing the goalposts. I think the overriding aim of the law is not so much to suppress, to persecute, or to take over the assets of any entity. I think it is to remedy, is to consolidate, to ensure that we have a system where if members of that association are legitimately aggrieved, because we cannot claim to imagine that there's a system where every member of that association or that system is fully okay, or is fully happy with the way things are being done. So if members of that section...
Listening to Reverend, he said the law is actually for the people, and the people seems to be uncomfortable with it. The place of amendments. In one sentence, let's get that from you. We've fast spent on time already.
When you say people, you know, the word people is being used in a very loose sense. So in a democracy, you appoint legislators to be your voice.
This particular section of the law is like concerned with non-governmental organizations.
Particular group of people.
Yeah, and they are come out to talk about this now. So in the place of amendment, in one sentence, let's get that from you, please.
That is what I'm saying. It's up to the people to talk to their legislators. They make the law. You know, it's up to the people to talk to their legislators who will go back to amend the law, or who will stand their ground to say that, no, this is what we think is in our best interest. Not to forget that the law was not just, it didn't just fall from heaven. The law went through a process that involved different interest groups. It's also wrong to assume that the law is just made for the benefit of NGOs. The law is made for the benefit of society as a whole. You know, anything that is not in anything that does not affect the public is usually not legislated upon. You know, once something is legislated upon, it means it has an overbearing effect on other aspects of the society. So it's not just to say we'll take aside members of the church, we'll ask them, are you okay with this? We are not okay with this. Okay, we will not do it. It's not that simple. Mind you, members of the church are just a small segment of NGOs as a whole. You know, we have religious organizations, we have a lot of charity organizations, we have other groups. Yes, certainly.
We have to just end this conversation right now. If we say we should go on, we will continue to tomorrow. I may not be able to end it, but there are a whole lot of take-homes from this particular conversation already, and then we may want to continue as when necessary as it is, because we're looking at possible amendment, and like Barrister has said, if the church or the people reach out to their representative and they feel that the law should be amended, it has to be amended. And if the people say they should stand their ground, it is up for the people to, okay, we sent you for an interest, you're not representing our interest, let's recall you back. Reverend, it's been an amazing moment with you.
Thank you so much.
We hope to see you once more.
Thank you so much.
The much we can take on this outing for today. We'll now leave you with a particular package.
All right. Anyway, the package is still saying thank you very much. We've had Reverend Moses Gracefield, Uche, presiding pastor of Philadelphia Kingdom Glory Church International. And we've also had Barrister Michael Dugeri. He is a corporate lawyer and a legal practitioner. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us via live video. It's been a great time on the show on Daybreak Africa. And this is the point where we draw the curtain. We'd like to say thank you so much for staying with us. We'll be back tomorrow, same time, to take you on another beautiful cruise. I'm Susan Achin.
And my name is Elvis Oga. Do well by joining us tomorrow, same time, same place. We'll leave you with our package on our news across Africa. Stay with us and stay safe and have fun.